Hello, YouTube. So, today we're going to start with maybe the most understated thing about the war or special military operation between Russia over here and Ukraine over here. Now, the rough population size is, I think Russia is 150 million and Ukraine is about 40 or something. So it's about a 3-to-1 in population advantage for Russia. And in terms of GDP, I think it's more like 10-to-1 in favor of Russia. And Russia had previously been viewed as a superpower. And Ukraine, let's be honest, a third-rate power, mostly armed by antiquated Russian hand-me-downs. Now, the mere fact that in the Russian special military operation that they've actually been pushed back, not by asymmetrical warfare, with guerrilla tactics or terrorist attacks or anything like that, but in open combat, using regular battles of maneuver, using conventional weapons. This is alone probably that's it. That's the end for Russia there, when you're getting your ass handed to you by conventional weapons in open combat. So, previously the Russian front line was, they managed to take Severodonetsk, which is about there, and then they had bits of this and a bit this part of the river here. And, so the first stunning thing is that Ukraine has actually managed to do something that Russia hasn't. It managed to conduct a successful war of maneuver against a prepared enemy. Arguably, Russia managed to do this in the early days of the war when they first invaded. Again, they made very good headroads in the first few days, where they managed to push in all over the place. But this was only in the first few days, not against a sort of military prepared opposition. Ukraine has managed to do it. When Russia tried it against prepared defenses, they made incredibly slow progress. I mean, it was sort of attritional warfare, no real signs of wars of maneuver or anything. But what Ukraine managed to do, which is very impressive, first of all, in the days of complete satellite coverage and all that sort of thing, they managed to launch a surprise attack, and that's actually fairly impressive. And so the Ukrainian lines will more or less mirror this. They managed to actually amass troops, and they managed to break through the Russian lines, and in short order, basically carve out this portion here, which the mere fact that they can do it at all is basically this spells very, very bad news for the Russians. That first of all, the Ukrainians are logistically more sophisticated than them. That they've managed to essentially do a breakthrough, a build-up. They did a military build-up, a military breakthrough, and now the real question is, you've got a problem when you get a breakthrough like this, in that most of the Russian equipment would have been left on the front lines, and apparently has. You take a look at the footage, there was an awful lot of stuff left behind. There wasn't any real chance to take it with them. So, now you've got a problem. You got all these Ukrainians and nothing to stop them. You've got to, at some point, re-establish the front line, which means that you've got to be logistically good enough to maneuver stuff there. And Russia's really not shown that ability thus far in the war. They could do maneuvers like this against unprepared targets in the first few days of the war, but ever since then, there's been no evidence that Russia can do these large-scale redeployments. Now comes the problem, right? So it's always the problem once you get a breakthrough like this, is how far and how fast can you go? So at the moment, there is very little to stop them. But if you've not actually got enough stockpiles of people, fuel, and ammunition, there comes a point when the tanks just run out of gas. And that's a bad place to be if you're fighting against a prepared opponent, because they can then just cut you off in return and you're kind of screwed. But it looks like the initiative is currently with the Ukrainians. I have no idea, but whether they can actually get enough gas and supplies to these people to just keep going. I mean, because all of these folks down here, the further you go, the bigger of a logistical headache this becomes for the Russians. That initially they've just got to sort of they've got to stop the advance and reform the front line here. If they push on, well, now you've got to, it gets a progressively harder job to reform the front lines as time goes on. And a lot of these is you're going to get held up by geographical boundaries. Most notably roads, rivers, that sort of thing. This is now, when you just think of it in terms of overall numbers, right? So previously you had Russia, which, let's have their front lines looking roughly like this, and Ukraine roughly having parity. And when you roughly have parity, no one has enough troops to be able to group up and punch through the enemy lines. Now, the Ukrainians not only managed to get a sort of mobile reserve with enough fuel and ammunition and all that sort of thing to break through on this sort of level, they managed to do it in secret, which is actually quite impressive. And if you take a look at, what's happened here in practice is they broke through and destroyed a certain amount of Russian stuff or captured. Now, it's not available to the Russians anymore. And this was a relatively modest loss to the Ukrainians. So their total force values look something like this. Meanwhile, the Russians are now at a numerical disadvantage, and the Ukrainians still have this mobile force. And, these things become a runaway after a while. And it gets progressively harder to actually do anything about it. Now, the thing that's really striking about this war is it looked like the Russians had sort of settled into this grinding attritional warfare. They've shown no ability that they can do maneuver warfare like this. And this is really the name of the game for winning wars quickly and with least number of losses. Sort of ideally, well, I mean, the big one, of course, is if you actually get through a lot of the wars historically. I mean, World War II, the Crimea Peninsula here was very important because there's only one way onto it and one way off of it. And when the Germans came in, it's a lot of it is about holding the bridges, and once you get on, you have to be able to break through the bridgehead, and once you do that, it's wide open territory, and then you have another battle, World War II, about Sevastopol, and that went both ways. When the Germans were coming this way, they had to fight these battles over here, and when the Russians were coming back again, it was essentially exactly the same battle again, played in reverse. So the geographical aspects of this are the same, but I mean you can see that if you can stop retreat from here, all of a sudden this Russian position here looks remarkably flaky. In the you cut this off as well, and this is basically all of Russia's strength invested, or all of their available strength invested in the front line. Either that, or you have to believe that they're perfectly happy to watch their military forces get outperformed like this on the battle. You have to believe that they have the ability to be able to stop this, but they've chosen not to for some reason, which I think is a bit of a reach. So, yeah, it's what typically happens is, this happens all the time in wars and maneuver, is you have some big stockpile of stuff that you've got to have put together to prepare for this invasion. And you can capture some stuff as you go, which keeps your invasion going a bit longer. But eventually, this probably had an expected size that it was meant to go for. It's probably significantly beyond its advance, probably beyond where it was expected to, if I had to guess. And so it's now a question about how good are your logistics. Can you actually funnel more logistics into this thing quicker than the Russians can? And if you can do that, then that's where these war of maneuver things really take off. So the bottom line is that a former superpower is basically had its arse handed to it by Ukraine on the open battlefield. That basically says, I think, almost everything you need to know about this current conflict and the likely trajectory and where it's going to go. So, hope you enjoyed that. If you did, maybe drop a thumbs up on it, and I will see you next time.